All right, welcome to this video, and I'm going to talk today about the Bradley Barometer. And this is a tool for financial astrology that a lot of people use. It's not a cycle. What it is it's a conglomerate of planetary transits, and it's based on longer term transits, middle term transits, and also something called declination. And it really has no direct link to the market in terms of a correlation that would create a mathematical cycle. All that it is what's going on in the sky, and we give positive values associated to positive transits, things like conjunctions of some planets, semi-sextiles, sextiles, trines, traditional harmonious angles. We would give those positive values. And then the negative angles, anything dealing with like a 45, a 90, a 180, a 270, we would, the fourth harmonics and the eighth harmonics, we would assign a negative value. And what they do is they dump all of these into a pot. And the person who created this was Donald Bradley. It was created in the early 1900s. And the idea was that since the market is based off of a mass of people, that if you just combined all of the transits together, that when they're all kind of working together in a positive mood, it creates a positive outcome for the market, and when it's negative, it creates a negative outcome for the market. Now, back in the early 1900s, when this was created, there was less market manipulation in terms of the Federal Reserve and things, entities coming in and just outright manipulating the market. So it tended to work better in the early 1900s. Even through the 1980s and 1990s, it worked pretty well. But recently, it's been more off than it has been on, simply because we have the Federal Reserve dumping $120 billion a month into the market, and it distorts things. But what I want to do is I want to just give you an introduction here. I want to go back to the 1920s and 1930s, and what we have here, the black line is the Dow Jones, and the blue line is the Bradley Barometer. And you can see here that when the Bradley Barometer did a very good job in the early 20s of forecasting these market peaks and these declines. You can see here the blue line here peaked somewhere into about April 20th, 1929, and it dropped consistently through that decline that we had that kicked off the Great Depression. And you can see the market more or less followed it. So the Bradley Barometer really is good in terms of turning points and a lot of times extended trends. It does a really good job in predicting this. Now remember, this blue line has nothing to do with the black line. In other words, they're two completely mutually exclusive, or supposedly they're mutually exclusive. They're not really mutually exclusive, because we know that what's happening up in the sky affects the mood, the social mood of the people on the earth. But what I'm saying is that this blue graph is not derived from this black graph. It's basically outlining what's happening with the transits in the sky. And it's just, for a long time, it was a very good oscillator. You can see here in the 1930s that a lot of these turning points, it's not always perfect, but a lot of the turning points are outlined in the Bradley. So even today, a lot of financial astrologers use it as like a staple. And I think it's important to look at it still. But we need to we need to know that now when we're looking at these things, we have external forces such as the Federal Reserve acting that affect it in different ways, maybe diminish the effectiveness of this indicator. But let's take a look here into the 1987 crash, and you can see the Bradley peaked right before the stock market crash there in August. It peaked right when the market peaked. You see that, and then it declined all the way through there. So it's a useful tool. I always keep an eye on it. I kind of want to know what it's doing. The market can go against it. We saw that before. We saw it recently actually in the market, because when the governments come in and pump all this money into the market, it can run against this Bradley. So that's why you got to be careful against just using this for forecasting. But it's not a bad model. If you look here into 2007. Take a look at this into here before the financial crisis. We had a bottom into here around, I think it was in the 2006 area. Then it ran all the way up. Notice when the Bradley peaks here. It peaks right around 2008 in May. and it goes all the way down through this financial crisis. Now notice the market went down a little bit more, even when the Bradley started rising, but that was a pretty good turning point. And a lot of financial astrologers who just use this Bradley were looking like rock stars in the 2008-2009 period, because the government really hadn't gotten involved yet with all of this bond purchasing. They really got involved. I mean, they actually started getting involved into this area, into here, but really it was March of 2009 when they came in. And so after that point, the Bradley kept rising. But one of the things that I'll point out here is that after 2009, I remember this very clearly, people were expecting a top into here when the Bradley fell. And, you know, the market did fall a little bit, but notice it didn't fall that much, you know, because, you know, we just had, we had other things going on, basically, with the markets. And then we had, you know, the Bradley bottomed into here. It more or less bottomed with the markets. It didn't pull it down all the way, but, you know, it did have a decline. Even back in here into 2009, it peaked well before the market did. And again, this is because, again, the Federal Reserve was purchasing bonds into here. And so if the Bradley's going to fall and the government's dumping in all this money, you know, and the dollar gets devalued, the market's going to keep going up. So, you know, this is just one application of astrology. You know, my background really is the financial astrology, the financial aspects of this. I mean, I do Uranian astrology, and I'll do independent events, and, you know, just, you know, you can rectify events in the world, but this is really, to me, what is more interesting, just because of my background in engineering and physics. So, you know, this is really what I do. But anyway, back into 2010, they announced another round of quantitative easing into here, and it coincided nicely with the Bradley. So when you have the government in here purchasing and you have the Bradley moving together, it tends to work very nicely. Now, going here into the present, one of the things that I think is interesting here is that the Bradley topped in early 2012, and a lot of people expected the market to basically decline through 2012. But the problem, you know, one of the issues that we had was, you know, all the way into this 2011 period into here 2012, we had all this this nonsense going on in Europe. We had the European bond repurchases, and we had all of these you know, things going on with Europe, and so they were basically adding more fuel to the fire of the market, and the market really tended to ignore the Bradley once we got past June into July, because you know, we were getting into announcing these new rounds of the quantitative easing. Actually, that was announced into here. But I think what's going on here is that the reason we didn't get a crash into here was simply because of all the global stimulus that's been going on with the monetary policy, and that was kind of masking or hiding the effect of this declining Bradley, right? So now the Bradley's bottoming, right? And the government's basically all in terms of purchasing bonds. And so now I think you're going to have you have the potential here, at least for a major rally in terms of the Bradley. Now, there's other things that I look at that say, well, maybe not, you know, there's other issues, like it's a very strong possibility right now that we have already entered recession. And you know, people don't see it yet. It's because it's recession. It takes many months to see it. But if we are into recession or a stagnation economically, then I don't know how this would play out in terms of a potential rally. But we do know now that the market has rallied on this latest news with the deal with the fiscal cliff. And in my trading service, I was long on that. Before January the 1st, so we've caught most of this move right now. We're up about 30, I think we're up right now about 33 points on the S&P futures on this move. This graph doesn't show it, but the market is actually up today. So going forward, this is it's kind of interesting, because I think there is the potential for a pretty good rally into here based on this underlying government stimulus, and it's very possible that the reason we didn't decline with this last Bradley decline is simply because the governments were just pumping all this money into here. So, you know, based just on the Bradley, it's very possible that this thing could rally up and go higher for the rest of the year. But there's other factors to consider. So you can't just look at one cycle or one financial event and say, aha, that's what it is, because you have to look at more things. And many of the models that I run are just simply mathematically based, and I use the astrology as a backdrop. But this is interesting to me because we're bottoming right now and the market is still climbing higher. So I think the potential here is, even though this is bottoming here, that this could slam much higher into here based on this Bradley. So, all right, so that's just kind of a basic background into the Bradley, and I wanted to explain some basic terms to you, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon.